Hello, welcome to this very first lecture that I'm preparing for the Yoga Therapy Institute's 200-hour yoga teacher training. And I'm recording this because I think for me it's good practice, but also I wanted to record and give other people the option to maybe learn a little bit more about the history and the philosophy of yoga. So I'm going to start a presentation and um, today we are going to mostly focus on the broader picture. What is yoga? What is the meaning of the word yoga? Um, and what is the timeline of the history of yoga? And we will combine this with my presentation and me telling you some things, but also very much so I will be asking you questions. So make sure that you have pen and paper, that you maybe have a nice drink of your choice, and make sure that you gather everything, that you're comfortable, and then you can even hit pause for the recording. And then let's get moving when you are ready. So, as you can see, I have my presentation ready for you. But before we dive in, take some time to settle in. Make sure that you're comfortable and maybe snuggle a little bit more into your seat, whatever your seat is, whether you're on a couch, at a desk, at a table, or maybe even on your yoga mat. Make some little movements just to notice the support that your seat is offering you. Let's take a few moments to breathe. You can close your eyes or soften your gaze. And maybe sigh out an exhale or two, giving yourself some time to land here in this moment. Maybe also giving yourself a few moments' time to finish any thoughts that you might have walked in with. And if you like, I like to invite you to maybe rest one hand close to your heart, maybe one hand close to the lower ribs or your belly, wherever it's comfortable for you. And if you prefer to rest your hands anywhere else, please choose to do that. We'll take our few breaths here, not changing anything about the breath, simply noticing that you are breathing. Maybe feeling the movement of the breath underneath your hands in your body. And let's also take this time to acknowledge that you already know so much. You already share so much. Give yourself permission to learn at your own pace, to absorb everything that you're taught at your own pace. Giving yourself permission to not have to understand or know everything right away, as we are all here to learn from each other and from ourselves. And especially for our sessions today and tomorrow, let's take a moment to open ourselves up to learn from all those that have come before, from all those that have shared their knowledge, their ideas, their creativity, and their wisdom. And may we soak it up and give ourselves time to let all that settle into our minds, into our bodies. Taking one more breath here, maybe slightly bigger, lengthening your spine, and taking a soft exhale out. let's bring a little bit of movement, maybe rub your hands warm. And if you'd like, you can gently stretch out a little bit. And then let's get started. The lecture about yoga history. Now, before we start, what do we already know? Let's start with a question because presumably we are all here because there is something about yoga that you love. It's brought you here, it's brought you to a yoga mat, it brought you to the point in your life where you either want to learn more about it to deepen your own practice, or it has brought you to the point where you maybe already are a teacher or want to become a teacher so that you can share yoga with others. So, what do we already know? And we're going to take some time with this, so you don't have to come up with an answer right away. I actually am going to invite you soon to grab your paper, your pens, maybe a few different color pens, and let's take some time to realize that everything that we know or think we know is come from everything that we've seen around us, that we've practiced with other people, that we've read, that we might have seen on TV or on YouTube videos. So, acknowledging the fact that there is a lot of information out there that we have purposely or maybe even without knowing it absorbed. And there's a lot out there. So, as we take time to dive into our own knowledge, into our own thoughts, into our own patterns, we're going to try to make a definition of yoga. And it's about your definition. So, not thinking about what the right definition is. And I use my quote marks here because that's a bigger question. Is there one definition of yoga? I'm curious. What do you think? Let me know before, maybe write it down and let me know after you finish this video lecture. Do you think that there is one definition of yoga? Bearing in mind that it's been a practice that's been developing over centuries now. Um, it might seem like a simple question, but the answer might be anything but simple. So, how are we going to do this? We will take a total time of about 10 minutes to work out your own definition of yoga, knowing fully well that definitions might evolve over time, and maybe even in 20 minutes, you might think of something different. Let's give ourselves permission to change our minds about that. But the first 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to just put everything on paper that comes up. Now, everyone works differently. So you might want to draw, you might want to write, you might want to make a combination of those things. Maybe you prefer lists, maybe you prefer long, beautiful sentences. It doesn't matter how you do it, but I'm asking you to just allow any thought that comes up with you when you hear the question, what is your definition of yoga, to come out of your pen and onto paper. And after 5 minutes, we're going to take some time, maybe shake it off for a little bit, take another few breaths, and then we're going to look at what you wrote, you by yourself. We're not going to do this out loud yet. We're not sharing anything at that moment. But then looking at everything that you wrote down or drew or whatever came out, and then maybe you highlight the things that jump out at you the most, or maybe you circle or underline the things that are most meaningful to you. And then from that, we will see if you can create a definition of what yoga is. Okay. So I'm going to start a timer and I will give you a little warning before the 5 minutes are up. And then we will take some time to see what comes out. And maybe if you feel up to it, you can share a little bit. So here we go. The timer for your first 5 minutes starts now. You have about 1 more minute. This is a good time to finish your sentences, maybe finish your drawings, and start wrapping up. Okay, let's put down pens and anything that you might be holding on to. We can gently shake out, or maybe you were writing really intensely and you'd like to massage your hands for a moment. And little movement in the shoulders. And if you like, you can take a nice big stretch, just taking some time to find a little bit of movement. Mm. Okay, now, hoping that you're comfortable, take some time to look at what you wrote down, whether it's been drawings or words or lists, whatever you wrote. See if there are things that stand out. Maybe things that are a little bit more important to you than other things that might have been written down. You can underline them, you can highlight them, or you can put those words on a new piece of paper. And then we'll just take a few minutes. Let's take about 4 minutes to see if those things, the ones that speak to you the most, or maybe that feel like yoga to you the most, if those can create a definition. And your definition can be anywhere between one word and maybe a paragraph. Let's try not to go bigger than a paragraph, but anywhere in between that, creating your definition of yoga. Now, if we were in the same space, I would ask everyone after those 4 to 5 minutes to share their definition. Unfortunately, we cannot do that live, so I'm hoping that if you create a definition, if you can maybe put it in the comment section below, because I would love to see what comes out. And I'm going to ask you to put it in the comment section before we continue on. But first, we're going to make our definition. So again, I'm going to give you some time to look through whatever it is that you wrote down or drew and then make your definition. Let's say 4 minutes for this. Okay, so I'm very curious to read your definitions, and I would like to then walk you through what I'd like to share with you about what yoga is. Let's start with what the word yoga means. So, simply the word yoga. Yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yush, and that word in English means to yoke. Now, to yoke means to bind or to connect or to harness. The first time that the word yoga is found in written text, it was actually used to describe the action of connecting a horse to its carriage. So, harnessing a horse. And that's the very first time the word yoga was ever mentioned. So, that was very different from what yoga means today in our world now. So this picture, by the way, is from the Bhagavad Gita, which is something that we will dive into later. But I thought it was a very nice picture to use as we take a moment to think about that we know this, right? In our modern languages, it's also the case that the language changes. Um, but I thought it was interesting. So the very first time it was mentioned, it meant uh, yoking a horse to a carriage. Now, yoga means oneness, union, and that can encompass so many things. It can mean becoming one with oneself. So, connecting your mind, all the different layers that we have within ourselves, from emotions to the body, to the physicality, to the spirituality. When we connect all that, that can be yoga. It can also mean that union between yourself and a higher being, which makes it more the spiritual connection. So that is the word. But now, of course, we come to the question, what is yoga? What does yoga mean? What is the definition of yoga? And hopefully you have come to your own definition. And I just want to show you that there are many different views because this is a question that we have been trying to answer for centuries. There are many, many different people who studied what yoga is, who have explained what yoga is according to them, according to proof that has been found in history. So I wanted to take just a look at a few different definitions of yoga that I have found. This one comes from the Upanishads, one of the oldest texts that we will also use in the rest of our training. And this translates to when the senses are firmly reined in, that is thought to be yoga. So pulling back from everything around us, what we see, hear, taste, smell, or feel, that is yoga. Implying that yoga is a state, right? A state to be in when we close ourselves off from everything around us, when we can move inwards fully. Then came Patanjali, which we will study a lot more later. But for now, let's just go with this one quote that might be the most famous sutra. Yogas chitti vritti nirodha. Yoga is the calming of the fluctuations of the mind. There are more translations of this one sentence, but I chose this one. It can also be soothing or stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. And the fluctuations, the vritti, is what you in in modern day would call a monkey mind. When we calm our monkey brain, that is yoga. Also meaning yoga is a state to be in, right? It's not a thing we do. It's not practicing poses. It is what happens to us when we calm the fluctuations of the mind. So more on the sutras and Patanjali later. And for now, let's move on to the Bhagavad Gita, where it is said, Yoga Karmasu Kausalam. Yoga is skill in action. which means it's not just a state. It is something that you do, that you have a skill to do. And of course, we'll dive a little bit deeper into the Bhagavad Gita later. But you start to see a shift here. And then I want to make a big jump to a definition from a very recent book called Embrace Yoga's Roots from Susanna Barkataki. And in one of the first chapters of this book, she says, at its root, yoga is a practical, structured, scientific framework and embodiment practice that aims at curing our personal and social ills. So, Susan Barkataki is an advocate for not shying away from the colonial history of yoga, of being an activist to make yoga or bring yoga back to its roots, to step away from appropriation, which is something that we'll discuss at a later time as well, and very much bring it back to the origin of what yoga stems from, not shying away from the spiritual side of it, from what was the origin of yoga, and bringing that into our modern day practice. And she says that it's both practical, it's structured, it has a scientific framework, and it's a practice. So it's something that we do based on a lot of knowledge that goes way, way back. And we use all that almost as a tool to cure anything that might ail us. So, personal and social ills, it can be anything from spiritual difficulties to maybe having a monkey mind or having a lot of stress that settles into your body, which can lead to so many different troubles. So, very different from what Patanjali and Bhagavad Gita have said up till now. So, another one from a very modern day book from Accessible Yoga by Jivana Heyman. He is an advocate for making yoga accessible, which is something that is a big part of our training and which is also very, very important. His definition is as follows. He says, at its heart, yoga is a spiritual practice that can be used by anyone at any time if you know how. Yoga is a path of self exploration, self study, and self awareness. So, if we take this definition, yoga is a path. It's not a thing we do, but it's a path that can lead us to explore ourselves, to study, to bring more awareness to ourselves and how we as human beings function. So, more a path. So, we went from a state to a practice to a path. Now, I have one more modern definition, which might surprise you, but I thought I would ask ChatGPT. And ChatGPT says, this is the longest, yoga is an ancient practice originating in India that integrates the mind, body, and spirit. It combines physical postures, asanas, breathing exercises, pranayama, meditation, and ethical principles to promote holistic well being. The word yoga comes from the Sanskrit root yush, meaning to join or to unite, symbolizing the union of individual consciousness with universal consciousness. Now, I know opinions differ on ChatGPT, but I'm always curious what ChatGPT says. And I do know that I have taught my version of ChatGPT a little bit about what I find important. So I'm actually really curious if you go to ChatGPT, if you get the same definition as I do. That would be interesting to hear. But I do love how actually ChatGPT's definition kind of combines all the definitions we've had before. And I think that is exactly what we are also trying to do in these sessions, in our training, in our workshops. We take in all the knowledge that we have, and then we see how we can best bring together that knowledge to share yoga, to share our love for yoga. So we have many, many different definitions now. And I'm going to put them all on a screen, and it's going to look very full and too busy. But take a moment to just look at these definitions and see if any of these resonate with you. And maybe they all do. Maybe none of them do. But when you look at these definitions, is there anything that resonates with you the most? And again, if we were in the same space, I would ask you to share or maybe to ask any questions that you might have. But in this online version, I would love it if you would write down if anything resonates with you the most. What is that? Can you share that? And then from there, we're going to take a break and maybe grab a new drink, maybe move around, stretch a little bit. And then when we come back, we will dive a little deeper into the history of yoga, the very practical history, the timeline of how we came from the beginning of yoga to where we are now. And that sounds super simple, but as you can imagine, that's going to be a lot. So take a break, go to the bathroom, grab a drink, maybe a snack, and then the next video will dive deeper into yoga through the years.